Bonjour, and today we're talking about the indicatif imparfait en français. And I know you've heard the advice a million times. It's of paramount importance to study the tenses in French and other languages, of course, but this is the one we're studying right now, and preferably as soon as possible. So you don't become that buccaneer forced to entangle knotted grammatical rope like on the picture. Look at that. Really, I mean, shiver me timbers. Today, this will not be happening. Today, because in less than 10 minutes, you will have a much better understanding of the imperfect tense under your belt. So, I suggest we dive right in. Are you ready? Let's go. We're going to cover two things in this lesson. Part 1, how to form that tense. Part 2, or B, how to use it. Okay, previous lesson was the indicatif passé composé, and it's very important that you have a look at this lesson and this one, because those two tenses have a tendency to enter in conflict for many learners of the French language. So it's very important to divide the passé composé from the imparfait. And back to what I was saying, we're going to cover this lesson in two parts, and now just cover how to form it. This is the very first step, most important. You cannot use the imparfait before you know how to form it. So, as you know, the verb of the French language are divided in three groups. We have the ER verbs, group 1, IR verbs, group 2, RE verbs, group 3. And you might have noticed by looking at all those endings that they all end the same, regardless of the group they belong to. And this is great news. It means that as long as you can identify the stem and form the stem of the group that you are using in a sentence, you will know what ending it has. This is good news. I know it's still more complex than in English, but it's for the French language, it's a great news because there are many exceptions in general. But in that case, no exception. Je parlais, tu parlais, il, elle, on parlait. Nous parlions, vous parliez, il, elle parlait. Okay, to speak, to talk, parler. Finir. Je finissais, tu finissais, il, elle, on finissait. Nous finissions, vous finissiez, il, elle finissait. Watch out for verbs of group 2 when forming l'imparfait in French, because finir and finissait, you know, there's been some change here. We not only have a different ending, we also have a different stem here. So watch out when forming verbs of group 2 what the stem is. And same applies for group 3. You need to know how to form the stem of the group that you're using when conjugating verbs in French. In that case, it's not too hard. Vendre. Vendre, to sell. We just removed the two last letters and then added the ending to create the imparfait. Vendait, vendait, vendait. Vendions, vendiez, vendait. And that wraps it up for how to form it. It's pretty easy. Of course, most of the difficulties come from identifying what group the verb that you're using belongs to and how to form its stem. But in theory, this is not imparfait difficulty here. It's just conjugation system difficulty, not really ending related. And this is great news. And that was the part 1 of this video. Now, we're going to use the second part of this video to really take the most that we can out of this lesson. Because there are very specific situations where you need to use the imparfait in French as opposed to le passé composé. And we're going to cover exactly which. Because sometimes all you need to do is just to focus on one specific use for a couple of days, write many examples in that specific context, for the brain to start absorbing that tense. It needs a little time to digest that tense, which is different from the English language. B. Use A. Habitual actions. Johnny passait du temps dans cette église. Johnny spent time in this church, okay? But it also translates to Johnny would spend time in this church and Johnny used to spend time in this church. Here, in English, you could say it's slightly different. It doesn't mean exactly the same. You have nuances. But in French, the three English sentences mean the same as it comes to translating that sentence. It's the same. It means the same. So if it's a habitual actions in the past, we're not going to use many different tenses. We're going to use l'imparfait in that context. Now we have another case, interrupted ongoing past actions. And this, it starts getting interesting. It's when you combine the imparfait with other tenses. John sortait de l'église. Johnny was leaving the church quand un chien à trois têtes, when a three-headed dog, apparut sur le pavillon d'entrée, appeared on the entrance pavilion. And here we have an action that is interrupted by something else. And the action being interrupted, in that case, is the imparfait. So here, Johnny was leaving, Johnny sortait de l'église. Different, right? Here, it's worth noting also, it's a bit more complex, that apparu is the simple, le passé simple. Simple past, le passé simple en français, which is a tense mostly used in writing. Not so much when you talk to people. It's not colloquial, but I would recommend you still study that, and we're going to cover that tense in another lesson. But what interests us here is sortait. Johnny sortait, it is the imparfait. The action being interrupted. Johnny sortait de l'église. So Johnny's doing this, ongoing action, ongoing past action, being interrupted. The ongoing past action is l'imparfait. C, another case, is the descriptive writing, and we're almost there, almost there. It's the last one of the bunch, which means that it's really not that hard. When you look at the structure, the grammatical skeleton of the language, it's not that complex. The imparfait is not that complex. It's maybe when you try to understand when exactly use the imparfait rather than another past tense that gets a bit more complex, or when you combine the imparfait with other tenses, can get a bit more complex. But how to use the imparfait is quite simple. Descriptive writing. Des renouées du Japon, which is Japanese knotweed. I don't know if you like plants, herbs, flowers. This is beautiful. Japanese knotweed. Enroulaient le wagon. They coiled the wagon. Here, we're talking about a description. We're describing something. So if you're going to describe where you lived as a kid, well, guess what? What tense are you going to use? Obviously, it will be the imparfait. And when you have an ongoing past action being interrupted by another one, what tense are you going to use? And I'm wrapping up this lesson as I'm saying this. And when you're going to talk about habitual past actions, something that used to be a habit, what tense are you going to use? Right? We're wrapping it up right now. This lesson taught us that, or reminded us, I don't know how much you know about the French language yet, that we need to know how to form l'imparfait first, that all the endings, regardless of group 1, group 2, or group 3, are the same. AIS, AIS, AIT, IONS, IEZ, AIENT. It's very musical. And we also covered what use that tense requires. Habitual actions. Johnny passait du temps dans cette église. Johnny se brossait les dents en chantant la Marseillaise. Johnny would brush his teeth singing La Marseillaise, which is the national anthem of the beautiful French country. Also, interrupted ongoing past action. You have an action taking place, something happening, and then boom, this thing is being interrupted. The action, ongoing action, is the imparfait. And the descriptive writing case, which doesn't happen so often. I mean, if you're lucky enough to know people who describe places they used to live, or the sounds that they hear, or the food that they taste, well, it's a joy to listen to them talk about this. And in that case, it will be in the past, of course. So thank you for watching this video. I suggest that you now click the link below this video to find out if you can differentiate, set them apart, passé composé and imparfait. And I'll see you pretty soon for another grammatical content. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.